Today is June the 14th, and this is a special noticed workshop of the Port of the Islands Community Improvement District. Today's meeting has been properly noticed. A copy of the affidavit is on file at the district's office. Item 1 today is a roll call approval of the agenda. It's a one-subject agenda, and we should note that all members are present. And as part of the approval of the agenda, we should recognize Mr. Truckey's participation by Zoom, citing special circumstances. So can we have a motion to approve the agenda and recognize Supervisor Truckey?
So make the motion.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for that. While this is a workshop and there will be no binding action, there is an opportunity for public comment this morning, if there's any.
Kind of a sparse crowd.
Yeah, a little bit. They'll be here next week.
Anybody on online want to say anything? Okay.
Maybe it's the subject matter, but with that, let me introduce to you your rate analyst and econometric firm, Raptalis. Rob Ward is with us this morning. Rob, we want to thank you in advance for incorporating this engagement into your work plan this spring. We know the firm is very busy, and we're very grateful for the work that was done in this regard. Thank you especially for sharing the advance draft report last week. I know the board found it to be very thorough and somewhat fascinating in terms of the elements here. So with that, Rob, if you don't mind, just kind of give us a very brief introductory of the firm, and then I have shared with the board, I believe, the PowerPoint slides that you're also going to review this morning. So good morning.
Good morning. Can you all hear me okay? First of all, make sure you can hear me.
We can hear you fine, thank you.
Great, good, okay. Again, for the record, my name is Robert Ory. I'm Vice President with Raptalis Financial Consultants. Just to give a little bit of background, Raptalis is a utility rate and financial consulting firm that specializes in utility rates, all utility matters, whether it's bond issues, utility acquisitions, accounting issues, and whatnot. We're not engineers. My background is I'm a CPA, so I got a financial type background in my state. Been doing this work for well over 40 years now, so guess you can tell with the gray hair. But we Raptalis has been in Florida for many years. In fact, they just give a little bit of history. They purchased our firm, Public Resources Management Group, which I was president of years ago, and we've been working in the state for well over 30 years. So that's a little bit of background on us. A little bit more about me. I've got a lot of experience in the Southwest Florida area. I provide utility consulting services to Collier County. I have served Marco Island in the past, Lee County, Sarasota County, Manatee County, etc., or some of the big counties over there that we serve. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be with you all today and give me the opportunity to present our preliminary findings and have a dialogue on where you want to try to go with rates in terms of rate level and rate structure. They're two different things, and I can explain that to you later. Also, normally, if you want to ask questions during the presentation, that's fine. It's usually better to wait to the end if you can to get through the presentation. But if there's something that you really want to ask a question on, just let me know, and I'll try to get to it either with another slide or answer very quickly, if that's okay with everybody. I'm going to share my screen and start with the PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully this works here. Let's see how we do here.
There you go.
I'm trying to get to. Do you see? What do you see? Do you see the full presentation on the screen by itself, or do you see slides on the left?
We see the slides on the left. You've got the, basically PowerPoints up.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not working. Okay, let me, hold on.
I mean, it works. There it is. Both.
Yeah, it works fine.
It's fine. We have both.
Yeah, I'd like to make it bigger. Let me see if I can, hold on a second. I'll share this one. Hold on, I'm almost there. Usually I have my son helping me here, Matt Ori. Do you see it now?
Here we do.
I want to mention Matt as well today. He was a primary analyst on this project and assisted a lot in preparing this. I just want to give him recognition. He's traveling today on PTO, but anyway, he wanted to let me know that he said hi, I hope everything goes well. But today, what I'd like to do is just, the next 15, 20 minutes or so, just talk about, what we were tasked to do, discuss the findings through the revenue sufficiency analysis and potential rate structure changes. Revenue sufficiency analysis deals with level of rates, and rate structure obviously is how do you collect those revenues, and then talk about conclusions, observations, recommendations, etc. So basically, our scope again was to prepare, revenue sufficiency analysis first, which is a forecast of the expenditure and funding needs of the utilities. And basically, what this analysis is for is to evaluate the ability of your revenues derived from rates, which would include your current non-ad valorem assessments, and I'll call them assessments, to meet these expenditure needs. To the extent that we projected they do not, we identify system rate adjustments. And it also could be, and since they do, we tell you what the surpluses are. The other thing in the revenue sufficiency analysis that we look at is try to estimate your fiscal position in terms of liquidity or cash, any coverage or rate covenant requirements for any debt, which although you have no debt now, we're projecting some, which I'll explain in a bit, and just try to determine a rate phasing, a rate structuring plan. At a minimum, we're looking at fiscal year 2025 as the test year for any rate adjustments. However, the forecast goes out through, I believe, 2028. And we do that because if there's any rate phasing requirements, we want to try to identify those. Funding of capital needs can be very lumpy. 1 year could be high, 1 year could be lower. However, you want your rates to be, very level and linear. So we look at multiple years to try to help you determine what you think your best rate implementation plan is. Then we also looked at recovery or valuation of the base facility charge. That's your fixed charge that you charge your customers for service. Currently, that charge is as a non-ad valorem assessment, but I've referred to that as a base facility charge now, which would be a fixed monthly charge, very common in the industry, and also utilized by Collier County as well. Let's go right into the revenue sufficiency analysis if we can. Again, we want to develop a financial forecast of the water and wastewater operations, and water and wastewater would include irrigation system. We looked at fiscal years 24 through 28, and we wanted to project revenues and revenue requirements. A big issue, which we'll get to in a minute, is to develop a funding strategy for your capital improvement plan in those expenditures. There's several $1 million of potential need in the system, and how best to recover that. We also want to make sure we are in a strong fiscal position, so we do look at cash reserve targets and financial performance in developing the plan, which we'll show you. So the goals of the study is, obviously we want to fully fund the cost of operations and the capital improvement plan. Well, relative to the plan, we've got a fully financed plan. I see many utilities identify their capital needs and say, oh, we're going to fund 50% of it, 75% of it. We did not do that here. Whatever was recognized in the capital plan for the next 5 years, where our goal is to fund that or develop a plan to fund that. That would probably include plant renewals and replacements as part of that CID. The capital plan is not just expansion type related capital, but would include any expenditures that would be capitalized to utility plant service. So there'd be major renewals and replacements, upgrades, rehabs, and you may hear me call that R&R or pay-as-you-go capital. We want to try to achieve, positive cash flow during the forecast period. Obviously, if there's any debt on the system, which we anticipate that we may need to borrow, which I'll get to in a minute, we want to have we target a debt service coverage ratio. And what that means is it's like your mortgage on your house. Once you pay all your expenses on your, for a living, let's say, you got your mortgage on your house and you want to have enough income after your expenses to cover that mortgage by a certain percentage. In our case, we picked a target of 200% or 2 times the debt service payment. By way of example, if I had $1 of debt service payments, we want to have a net revenue, which is revenues less expenses, of $2 available to pay that $1 of expense. What is that remaining dollar then? That would be what's pay-as-you-go capital, what's left over. We want to maintain operating reserves and minimize financial risk and develop rates based on meter charges and whatnot. Just a little bit of background. You currently serve about 682 water and wastewater accounts, which equates to 731 meter equivalents. A meter equivalent is the standard water use of a typical household. Let's say it's a common unit of measurement, and what it allows you to do that if you had a marina or a commercial customer that had water use, let's say equivalent to 2 houses, just to talk, that would be 2 equivalent residential connections or ERCs. When you look at your base charge, it's assessed, that's included as a non-ad valorem assessment on the property tax roll. Your allocation of that base charge is based on ERCs that were calculated at the time that the connection was made to the system. Another example of an ERC factor that's very prevalent in your system is the residential unit or dwelling unit factor for master metered accounts, condominiums, apartments. That's set at 0.8 ERCs per unit, again, which is a fairly common factor. Why it's not 1.0, where a house would be 1.0, is generally there's less occupancy in those units. Irrigation and outdoor use is usually separated. Again, you have an irrigation system, but usually the demands on that for that dwelling unit is usually less in the industry, and 0.8 is a pretty common factor, just so you know. 1 second here. Just move my model here to a second. Your combined system revenue is around 1.5 million, so just to kind of give you that number too as well. The operating expenses for the system, this is a graph showing the capital funding plan on here, but the operating expenses for the system are about $800,000, a little north of $800,000 for the fiscal year 24. And we expect them to increase to about $900,000 by 2028, with an average increase of 3.4%. We looked at your expenses individually and escalated those by a variety of factors based on the industry to determine that. But the point on the CIP, as you can see on that graph, this is a major driver of system rates. Obviously, inflation is a major driver too, of course. But the capital plan, we've identified about $9.3 million of capital needs through fiscal 28. And of that amount, you can see the colors there on the right. 5.9 million of that plan is assumed to be funded from the issuance of additional debt on the system. That's about 63% of the overall capital plan, and 3.4 million is projected to be funded from rate and operating reserves of the system. Now, and this plan was based on the timing of projected need of these expenditures provided by your engineers and system manager, and also trying to evaluate the fiscal position of the utility system. Let's just talk about the debt for a minute. You are currently a debt-free system, which is really good. I don't see that too much of that in the utility industry right now, so that is good. It gives you a lot of flexibility. The assumed amount of debt to be issued was about $6.265 million. If you remember the prior slide, we had a capital value of about $5.9 million. And the first question is, why is that different? We have issue costs on the system. You got to get financial folks and advisors to help you secure a loan. Professionals doing that. We also have. Hold on a second. I want to get to. We've also capitalized interest for a year right now. And what does that mean? That the first year of interest on the loan will be funded from the loan proceeds. That allows the deferral of debt in the near term and provides some flexibility on rates. We also then reflected 2 years of interest-only payments, starting in 2026, that'd be 26, 27, and then full debt by 28. Why we assume this structure right now is this allows for the projects to be constructed without having to pay debt during that time frame. Second, it allows rates to be phased in over time, so you're in a good fiscal position, a rate position to pay the debt, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. We can start, paying debt earlier, but to be honest, I like the phase-in flexibility because it doesn't put a major impact on customers right away if you were to issue this debt. So the principal amount of debt that we've assumed in the forecast, you can see in 2020 in the table, is about $433,000, and it's level debt for the remainder of the term, which we assumed right now 25 years. The interest rate we assumed was 4%. The market is up and down, but we thought that was reasonable at this time. And but that kind of gives you an idea of what was reflected in the revenue requirements or expenditure needs associated with funding that capital. The remaining capital, I'm going to go. If I go back a second. That blue you see is funded from rates, pay-go, and so we got all the debt. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but first, basically the debt is in the near term. This is where the capital needs are. So then we get more to a pay-as-you-go basis thereafter, which we think is very positive. We don't see the need to potentially issue more debt in the future. You do have some projects out there that may a little significant, with the rate phasing plan and whatnot, I think you're going to be good and try to avoid debt in the future. We could issue more debt if you wanted to, but I think this is a pretty balanced approach, and it doesn't over leverage the system. Based on our analyses, looking at the operating expenses, the increased debt, and the transfers to capital for capital projects, that green that you see there would be transfers from rates to fund pay-as-you-go capital, maintain reserves, operating reserves, etc. You can see within that black line there that the projected revenues are not from existing rates and assessments aren't. We don't think they're sufficient to meet this plan right now, and that you would need to raise rates in the next 4 years, approximately 8% for the first 2 years, then lowering down to about towards the 6.5%, 5% range in the future, based on the plan we have right now. Those rate adjustments do include price indexing or inflationary type allowances, which we assume to be approximately around 3%. So that kind of gives you a feel of the rates. I will tell you that a lot of utilities in Southwest Florida are raising their rates significantly. Lee County is looking at, I believe, their 9% adjustments for the next 5 years. Manatee County just adopted 9.75%ers for 2 years and expecting to do 2 more. Sarasota County has a major wastewater issues there going to advanced wastewater treatment, and they're looking at between 5 and 6% a year on wastewater, and their water system is also in need of improvement, and probably 3 to 5% there also. I know Hillsborough County is averaging 7%, 6 to 7% through 2035. That's been adopted, by the way, by the board. So I'm mentioning a lot of counties. I do a lot of county work, but the point I'm trying to say is rate adjustments are all across the utility industry. And a lot of these drivers, the reasons for these drivers is what we just talked about. Again, inflation is one. We went through a very high inflationary period ever since COVID hit us. The supply chain issues and whatnot, and we had the highest inflation. I think it was the last year or so since we had back in the Jimmy Carter era. And so a lot of utilities are recapturing that. That's obviously affecting your utility. But even more importantly is the cost of capital projects. I can tell you pre-COVID, if capacity to build capacity of a plant, for example, was $10 a gallon. So if you had 100 gallons, that cost you $1,000. Just understand what I'm trying to say. That $10 today is $20 to $30 in a matter of 5-6 years. It's unbelievable. And so as you're seeing these utilities with major capital improvement plans, just like your needs as well, those capital costs are significantly higher than they were several years ago. And that's why you're seeing utilities adjust their fees. But this is the plan we have right now in the analysis. And that's what you can see here, that blue line. That's those percentages. What does that do? It allows us to build our operating reserves over time and have them available for capital. So we've got some flexibility here. The reason why this rises is our capital needs are funded from debt and not from available cash. So we put ourselves in a good financial position. Then that gives you the flexibility to finance your capital from a pay-go basis going forward, including timing of when those projects can occur. I thought was very, very favorable. Debt service coverage, again, that black line is that target. Very, very strong coverage, very strong coverage. And we want that. It makes it very attractive to the market. Now, keep in mind, you may look at this and say, well, gosh, that's too high. We need to lower that. The amount of blue above that black line, or really above the 100% line, is what's funding that PAYGO capital. And if you look at the prior slide, again, you can see cash dropping. So our capital needs are still stronger than this. And this amount right here above the debt, from a cash flow standpoint, is providing that. But if you go to a bank or a lender or issue or conventional market, which I think you probably go to a bank of some sort, this looks very favorable to them because you're at low risk of not being able to pay your debt. That's where you want to be as you go to the market, if that's the choice you want to make, which we think you will. Again, you see no debt here. There's no coverage here because we push the debt off out as far as possible to allow rate phasing. So I'm going to stop right there for a second before we talk about rates. If you all have any questions, or go ahead and keep moving on, or I can show you the model as well if you want to see that. But I thought maybe we'd kind of get through it first, and if you want to get to some specific questions or other assumptions, I can do that. But whatever you would like to do.
Let's keep the pace, Rob. I think this is good. We're following you, and then we'll wait until we get to the proposed rates and conclusions and see where their questions are then.
Okay, that sounds great. Again, the proposed rates, just by way of example, your rates include two components. There's a base facility charge I mentioned earlier. Think of that as a fixed cost component, if you want, in your minds. And then you have a volumetric or variable cost component. That's your based on flow. How many gallons did you use times your rate? The base facility charge is billed as a non-ad valorem assessment, Florida statutes, chapter 197. You've had this facility charge in effect for a long time. It may have started off as a capacity payment. I'm calling it a base facility charge because I'm relying on this charge as an ongoing revenue to fund the system revenue requirements. That's what it needs to be. Keep in mind, and this is pretty important, since it's billed as a non-ad valorem assessment, it's a single annual charge billed. It's not separated by utility systems, but it's a flat amount billed essentially up front for the fiscal year. Normally, in most utilities, and this is kind of one of the objectives of the district, is this charge will be billed based on the meter serving the property. And this is one of the major objectives or questions to be discussed today. Your volumetric rate is based on metered potable and irrigation water. They're separate, as you all know. And wastewater is billed at 75% of the potable water rate, which I want to come back to that later on. But I want you to remember that it's 75%. One of the alternatives that Neil and Kevin asked us, and what we were asked to look at, was to discontinue the non-ad valorem assessment and implement a corresponding meter-based charge, essentially taking that base charge off the tax roll. If you do that, there is some benefit that you don't have to pay the tax collector for this, and whatnot. You do have a loss of revenue for any prepayments of the discount that's less than the 4%. And it does kind of provide some accuracy in terms of the customer and the billing of those customers, and it links complete utility service to the customer where the meter is located and where the service is being provided. I will tell you, not sure of there's not very many utilities, let me say it that way, that charge a base facility charge as a non-ad valorem assessment. The norm, as you all know, is that the base facility charge generally is attached to the meter of providing service, and also that is the rate structure utilized by Collier County for their system and in the regulation of the franchise utilities by the county's authority. So that's, we did look at this for you. This is your current rates for water and wastewater service. You see it's on the first line there, and this is for single family. And it can really be for commercial too, but single family, you'll see an existing rate of $116.92 for water and one for wastewater. They're identical. And you say you'll say, well, what is that? That is the non-ad valorem assessment divided by 2 for water and wastewater. I think expressed on a bi-monthly basis. Why we split them 50-50 is we do not have fixed asset records that we consider sufficient to try to allocate these costs based on assets. So we went ahead and did it 50-50 right now, equal allocation. Just so you're aware, when you do look at debt payments and security of revenues to pay that debt, or as you budget the system, many times the utilities are combined for a financial purpose, but separated for a rate application purpose. Obviously, you want water, paper, water, and sewer, paper, sewer. I think as time moves on, I think the district will want to look at this and possibly reallocate costs to or from water, to or from wastewater, etc. But right now they're uniform. If you look at the proposed, that's the meter-based rates up through 4-inch. Actually, we take it higher for commercial, and the rate for water. I'm going to just talk about water because it's the same. The 5/8-inch meter, the majority of your meters are $118.87, slightly higher than the existing base charge for ERC. The reason for that, number one, that 116 includes the markup for the 4% discount allowed by Florida statute. That's for those that prepay their property taxes in November. They get a 4% discount and 3210, and that $116 rate includes that discount. We maintained that discount in our calculation in the base charge because technically that is being billed on the tax bill. Reason why it's slightly higher is there's less ERCs on the meter-based approach than what is on the tax roll right now. And the primary reason for that is the tax roll has a significant number of multifamily accounts, dwelling units, that receive a non-ad valorem assessment for water at that 0.8 factor I mentioned earlier. This is very important. The ERCs on a meter approach is based on meter equivalent factors based on the demand criteria, which demand being water flow. Water can go through that meter. That's published by the American Water Works Association, or AWWA, in their M1 in their manuals. The meter equivalent factors are based on the demand criteria of those meters. And by way of example, the 5/8-inch meter is your smallest meter. That has a meter equivalent of 10. 3/4 inch has a meter equivalent factor of 1.5. How does that result? A 5/8 inch meter can, the instantaneous demand of a 5/8 inch meter is 20 gallons a minute. A 3/4 inch meter is 30 gallons a minute. And that's 30 divided by 20 is 1.5. A 1 inch is 2.5. 1.5 inch is 5. Then 8. Then I believe it's 15 or 16. And for 3 inches, it varies. And 4 inches, 25. Why that is so important?
Hey, Rob, let me stop you there just for a second. We do have I think maybe an important question.
Sure.
Hey, yeah. Hi, this is Russ. Hey, we got all these different size meters. Do we know where they're located? I don't know what goes to what. What's a single family? What's a multifamily? What's the hotel?
No, we do not.
Standards?
In the data we got, it was all the same. There's accounts.
We'd have to
They
determine.
weren't classified.
We don't know right now.
We'd have to go and find out.
We don't know.
Yeah.
But that's a good question. But to maybe soften that a little bit, if you're a commercial 5/8 inch and I'm a residential 5/8 inch, usually it's the same factor. That is also the factor utilized by Collier County in their rate determination and also in their regulation of franchise utilities. And it's also the rate application basis used by the Florida Public Service Commission in the regulation of private utilities across the state. Almost all utilities I know have the same base charge for residential versus commercial. I'm not going to tell you all of these. Some are different, but I don't think we're at that point right now to make that change. So that was a very, very good question. The other point, I think I'm going to continue on with your question a second. We do not know, too, I mentioned earlier that the base charge currently is that non-ad valorem assessment with a master meter at 0.8. We do not know, I do on our side of the fence, where that master meter is located relative to the meter that's serving that account. And I think it's easy if I just give it to you by example. If I have Rob Ory condo and it has 100 units in it right now, you're billing 80 ERCs for that condo. How did I get that? 100 units times 0.8 for each unit. Let's say that's what's on the tax roll. So there's 80 ERCs sitting there. But the meter, where you get your consumption revenue from, is serving that whole condo, the whole 100-unit condo, and that is probably being billed to the HOA. And so, and I know you're all thinking this. So if we convert to a meter base, that 100 units may be served, say, by a 4-inch meter. So that revenue that's on the tax bill for those 100 units would go then to the meter, be applied based on the 4-inch meter. And you know, there's some differences in meters there. There's 80 ERCs on the non-ad valorem assessment basis, but remember I mentioned 4 inches 25 on the meter equivalent basis. So in that case, you have a ERC reduction. Again, 80 ERCs for the non-ad valorem assessment, go to meter, the meter equivalent factor is 25. That's what's used in the industry. And that's what makes the equivalent meters different between the meter-based approach and the non-ad valorem assessment approach. However, when you look at the equivalent units being assessed, I don't remember what they are. Just bear with me 1 second. I gotta go back. I want to give you the right numbers. Hold on. There are 743 ERCs being billed on as a non-ad valorem assessment. We just added up all the ERCs on that from the tax roll. There's 743. If I take the meter equivalents times the meters that we know are in service, we get 731. So, although I mentioned all this, I was actually a little surprised how close the meters and the meter equivalents seem to be. A lot of your meters are 5/8 inch, and they're all 1-to-1. So, but this is an issue that we need to think about. So, but once we got that meter number, then we adjusted the 2025 number for those rate adjustments. Again, remember I mentioned that 8% rate revenue need, and let me just double check real quick. Right, so that, if you look at the first line there for 5/8 inch meter under water, you'll see 128.38. That's 8%, an increase of the 118 at 8%, which was our estimate. And it was applied uniformly to all rates right now. The issue is that we've not operated the system of the new management for a real long time. And the data is a lot better now than it probably was 6 months ago. But my concern is, do we have enough data and enough relationship between the non-ad valorem assessment right now and going to which is a known, going to the meter-based, which is somewhat an unknown right now. I get a little nervous that, if things change, or we've got a misinterpretation of the data, and I don't think we do, but it's a big shift. Will we have under recovery? We have cash balances sitting there, but I hate to utilize my cash for a revenue rate structure change than the capital funding need. I'd rather apply my dollars to the known versus the unknown right now. So that's just something. I'm just saying to think about this. But here's what the rates would look like: no change in the flow. However, there is one recommendation I would make, and that's on the wastewater usage at 75% of potable water. I personally think no matter which direction you go on the base charge, I'm of the impression you should limit that. You should not reduce the wastewater usage to 75%. Why am I saying that? Normally you'd see some sort of cap, some sort of reduction in all the other utilities, and that is true. However, you offer a different level of service than most utilities. You have a irrigation system that's, I believe, is service area wide. All your residential customers and whatnot have an alternative water use to irrigate. The reason for the cap is because that discretionary use for irrigation, most people don't have an alternative. They have to use potable water, which says that the metered potable water is not being returned to the sewer. You technically do not have that. Does that mean people aren't using water that's not being returned? Yes, if they're not using the alternative water resource, then that's correct. That would not be happening. However, they have an alternative. And so I don't think you should have a reduction in your potable water. The second part of that is that maybe I'm not, and Neil and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that 75% may be applied to commercial as well. It's based on the meter, overall meter. And that is, commercial generally doesn't have a lot of outdoor use relative to potable water demands, whether they had an alternative or not. So I would recommend to the district, as you move forward, you consider raising that potable water cap for wastewater billing to the 100% and make it 1-to-1. That's a recommendation that we do have. So the big issue here, if you accept the rate adjustment, which is independent of this cost recovery, is should the district go to keep the non-ad valorem assessment or go to meter-based. Now, you could phase to meter-based. I thought that was, we don't present that here. And the reason why I didn't do that is you'd have two different customers, one the property owner and one the meter account person, each getting the base charge. You could do that, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to go there. But so I'm talking to you right now, either non-ad valorem or either a meter-based type. For the non-ad valorem, it has the same payment status as property taxes. Very, very high. And the collection rate for this charge is also very high. And that promotes not only revenue stability, meaning and predictability, you know it's coming. It's on the tax roll and has the same status. It usually gets paid, so it's very predictable. And you can count on it at all times. Because of that, I would argue for this component of the rates is a reduced level of bad debt write-offs due to that high probability of collection. More importantly, this is one of my biggest issues, is by the fact you bill 100% of this base facility charge as a non-ad valorem assessment on the tax bill, it eliminates any seasonality issues associated with base charge recovery, because it's all being billed up front, regardless of whether the property is occupied or not. And I'm guessing, we do not have monthly consumption data, but I have a high guess here that the district is fairly seasonal in occupancy. I know Marco is, I know Collier is, I know all those utilities down the coast there are very seasonal for those that are on the water, which you guys are. So that eliminates that issue to somewhat. Now, we can fix that this side, but I want to mention that's a major criteria. Obviously, it's the current rate application you're doing now. There'd be very limited disruption. Customers, that's what they're getting. Whether they like it or not, that's what it is. If the bills are fully consolidated, the customer receiving the bill may not be the owner of the property. A lot of times they are, obviously, but if there's rentals there or whatnot, there could be differences. It could affect water use because of the level of the bill being received. Because of the system manager transition, I'm on that last bullet point down there. As I mentioned earlier, the data we have is fairly limited. Although I'm not saying it's not inaccurate, I think it's accurate. But a lot of times you may want to have a couple years of this data, more in relation to flow, but also in relation to trying to match all these units to where the meters are. Right now, the data we have does not do that. In this case, it may be best to maintain the status quo until you accumulate more data and understand the impacts and phase these rates in. However, on the meter-based, it's the most common utility rate structure out there. As I mentioned earlier, it's consistent with FDSC and Collier County rate-making criteria. And it's also consistent with the county's retail rate structure. So if there was a mention on time that maybe the county may buy this utility at some point in the future, who knows? But if they do, having a rate structure very similar to the county's rate structure assists in any potential sale of the utility, if that's where you ever wanted to go, because the rates are the same, the structures are the same. That every acquisition I've been on where you have that, it limits the impacts to the customer per se, because you don't have a rate structure change as well as an acquisition adjustment. So it's just a point to think about there. Having the meter-based rate the utility bill is fully tied to service. I mean, there's a much better link between the full service being utilized by the customer that's requiring that, whether it's the owner or whether it's the account recipient. It's, as we all know, they're getting the full bill. They see it, they know it, they can adjust to it. Another potential benefit is on a non-ad valorem assessment, you can only adjust that rate once. You can't adjust it for once it's been levied. On the meter-based approach, you can adjust the rates at any time. So if you have cost recovery issues, or there's the need to adjust rates due to a mandatory water shortage reduction, which really should link more to the consumption charge, but I've seen people adjust base charges on that. You can't do that on an on-animal assessment for the base charge component, but you can do that at any time on the meter-based component. So again, by that, if there's an issue, a financial issue, or the need to add additional base charge for whatever reason, a specific project or something, you can implement that relatively quickly and seamlessly under the meter-based approach. So that's kind of what we see there. Again, the biggest issue is the seasonality issue. Now, let's take a step back there for a second on seasonality. There are policies and procedures to help eliminate that on the meter-based approach. By way of example, many utilities, Manatee County is a good one, for example. I'm not sure if Collier does this, I just don't remember. They will adopt policies that there's no seasonal turnoff of service. A seasonal turnoff is, I'm going back to New York or Michigan, and I want to turn my water off at the service address. Forget about irrigation right now, because you have your separate irrigation meter, that can stay on. But you still bill me a base charge. You still bill me for service at that utility. It just goes to Michigan. The bill goes to Michigan versus going to my address in the district. And again, many utilities have that service, but they have a policy in place to enact that. So we can eliminate some of the, or minimize seasonality issues, but if you don't have this policy, it will take policy adjustments and whatnot to do that, and they impact customer service a little bit. But that there's policies you can adopt to do that to minimize that issue under the meter-based approach. And if we go meter-based, I would recommend a review of the policies, make sure that's in there, and eliminate the seasonality issue as much as possible. So I just wanted to mention that to you. And that could take a little bit of time, but clearly something that the district, I think, we need to do to protect itself. So with that, in conclusion, we think the existing rates are not sufficient through fiscal 2008 to meet its cost. It's, we mentioned it's due to increased operating expenses, due to inflation, increased capital costs, which are financed by the implementation of additional debt or new debt on the system. We identify rates 25 through 28. Doesn't mean you have to adopt them all or adopt any of them. If you want, we recommend you do, especially if you agree, and we can go to the model in a minute, but if you agree with the capital plan and the need to issue debt, I will tell you it's much more favorable in the ability to access the market if the rates have been adopted. Even better if they've been implemented, but at least adopted, because it provides a surety again that you'll collect revenue to meet that service coverage ratio I showed you earlier. So that's really critical. We think consideration of the adoption of a rate implementation plan. If you move to meter-based is the objective you want to be, and I totally understand why you want to do that. It may be good to, in my opinion, to probably wait a year to do that, to get more billing data, get more surety, of the accounts and matching those non-annual assessment roll to the meters themselves. That'll take some time, and adopt these customer billing policies to minimize the seasonality issues. Additionally, because we're not that far away, obviously the tax rules that need to be done, there could be some customer notification outreach you want to do because of the change in rate structure, what is happening, and then move forward with that potentially 2026. That would be my recommendation. If you want to go to meter-based, probably go slower than faster to preserve rate surety, revenue surety. And that's it for my presentation. If you would like to go to the model, or I can try to answer questions. Like if you want to see the CIP, what we have and what we did, or whatnot, I can show you all that if you like, or potentially try to run some scenarios if possible. Matt's not here today, but I think I could do it. So,
Rob, if you would at least put the dashboard for the model up, and then let's see what questions the board may have preliminarily. They have some proprietary software so that they can tweak the assumptions. You know, the rates are no better than the assumptions that have been incorporated, and they've got the ability to tweak this thing as you go along is fairly, that's it. And
do you see the dashboard?
yeah, we do.
Okay, great, good. Yeah, that's good. So usually Matt's running this. So anyway, this is our dashboard here.
This is their model on the dashboard, and at least it's not in the printed materials because
And what they do, they can change inputs based upon the discussion, and it'll change obviously the output in the data. Is that correct, Rob? Tony Pierce, how are you?
That's correct. That is absolutely correct.
How much do we pay to the tax collector?
4%. No, 3%?
3 is his fee,
3%.
and then in addition, there is
The discount?
the discount factor that he has
So up
talked
to
about.
7%.
And the property appraiser's fee is not a fixed, it's a variable sort of thing, but there is a modest component to the assessment roll for that.
Okay.
And at times, the tax collector will remit some of it back, but that's not all the time.
Not always a lot of money either.
Yeah,
So that's actually quite substantial.
3%?
Yeah, he takes his money off the top, whether it's a
Plus the
FAR-TAG or a non-ad valorem assessment or property tax.
plus the 4%. Do we add the 4% in advance and then give it back to them, or do we just take it off?
I think the 4% is included in the rates and in the assessment, because if somebody pays early.
So we're
Is that correct, Rob? That's my understanding?
That is correct. When you do your assessment, this is your tax roll right here. I think, where's your, I'm trying to find the assessment here. This is the ERCs. Yeah, right. Okay. I'm trying to find a single family home on here, but it doesn't matter. This is your basis. Here's your assessment. The answer of the 4% is correct. That amount you bill me as an assessment on the tax roll is marked up or grossed up for the 4%, so that if I pay in November, I pay 4% less. That's that discount, and that's what you rely upon. I guess for setting your budget, but the 4% is there. When we did our meter base, we kept the 4% in because right now that is being assessed, and if I didn't take advantage of it, you would get that revenue. I imagine, knowing the district, 70%, 80% pay early. That's usually what I see, but not everyone pays early. But yes, the 4% is built into this assessment.
One other question I had is, like your example, the 4-inch meter is basically working off of 25 ERCs then rather than the 80, right?
That's correct.
How do we equalize that? I mean,
That's what the meter-based approach is, and that's why Well, one way to do it would be for all residential master metered accounts, get that 100-unit condo I mentioned as my example. Instead of billing them on a meter-based approach, you could bill them on a unit-based approach, just like what you're doing somewhat on your tax roll right here. If you see this guy, I'll just pick John and Darlene Scala here. You can see what they're right here. They're 0.8, and that's a factor. We could not match the units to the meters. I didn't know where they were. It has to go one by one. The meter address for my 100-unit condo is 10 Ponce de Leon Street, but or Peacock Street, let's say here. But all these owners are in Peacock are separate, and we had a hard time trying to match all this, and but that's how you could do it, is try to develop a master meter rate similar to what you have here. I would recommend that, but that's not how Collier County do it. Actually, to be honest with you, Collier County had a meter-based rate. Oh my gosh, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and they went to pure meter-based, what we showed you earlier. I will also tell you that many customers or utilities have a unit-based rate. Manatee County, Lee County, Sarasota County, they all have unit-based rates. Hillsborough County, they have unit-based rates. And I would recommend you do that. Yes, sir.
I think does Gateway have a meter-based, I believe?
I think Gateway has a meter-based.
That's my recollection, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know you all do the rate study for them. Tony does.
I don't do them personally, but I think they are meter-based.
Yeah, Tony Hairston does it.
Yeah, okay.
I have another question for you guys. The condos over there at the hotel, are they individually metered, or is there a master meter there?
There's a master meter.
And then they just divvy it up from them, so.
They incorporate it presumably into their condominium fee.
So it's the same thing with the condos, or is it the same thing as the little boards or the marina part? We're really losing out on that then.
Yeah, and we staff developed an enormous amount of data to send to Rob that didn't exist.
Right.
And that part of what he's saying is that it would still be good to shore up some of his assumptions, is to do a survey or inventory of the actual meter sizes, back to Russ's question that he had, per account, and match it to a physical address, because none of that stuff is in any way contained in the district records.
Right. And then link that to the non-ad valorem tax roll to see the full progression and what's there. Now, if there's a water use behind the condo, for example, let's say it's a marina or a boat dock, and it's consecutive, not individually has a separate tap, but it's all part of a single master meter tap, that water use should be being recognized in the master meter. If there's a separate tap, obviously that needs to be a separate account. It's all based on meter size. And for a master meter unit basis, that gets recognized, that mechanism usually gets recognized in the overall bill to the HOA.
Robert, I have a question, if I
Yes,
may.
sir.
I have a question on that boat master meter. So I'll use Villages at Stella Maris as an example.
Okay.
The master has no master meter. All the condos are metered, each one of them separate. So the master doesn't receive a bill for any water other than the master meter for the boat docks. And that water, it is not possible to run that back through the sewer system. That goes strictly to the docks, and that's it. Would that meter also have a sewer charge on it, or would it say in that situation, would it be just water?
Just water. That would be a water-only account, because there is no return back. So that's how you would bill that one. And you'd follow the rate blocks, et cetera, for that account. I would recommend you maintain the conservation block.
Mhm.
Ron Westerman, Case Drive. I have a question for you. On all of these meters, we have backflow preventers that are tested by Mitch and his crew on a timely basis. Wouldn't there be something there that they could forward on to you on what size they're checking and where? There has to be a list of some sort for you to look at. And those backflow preventers are definitely checked.
Yes.
Right. I mean, we had total meter data. I mean, if
Yeah, it's just been overlooked.
if the location,
Have a list that you
Right.
can use.
Right,
that you
right.
can-
Yeah, I think we work with Mitch, we can get that
Because he
done.
did all the meter replacement, so he should have all the data.
True.
As to location and size and type,
Right,
Exactly.
yeah, without even all
yeah,
the
we should have that.
the key is not just location, but the key is who is the account holder as well. And that's the link that we also want to get, just to make sure. But yes, if they all have a backflow preventer, that data, if there's location data on that as well, I think that would be helpful. Again, we had some uncertainty there.
Yeah, I got one question. It's about, on this other thing, it says our current billing. It says that everything's bi-monthly except we do monthly charges for commercial RV customers. This says bi-monthly, but the net says monthly. That means we're charging them twice as much.
We don't have any RV charges.
Well, you get hotel,
That's no
commercial.
RV charges.
Well, RV, I was thinking boats. But that's different, seeing they don't have the right meters, but you know what I
My
mean?
guess is that's probably from clear back from when we did have RVs here. We don't have any.
I know, but I'm still asking that question. Do we charge the hotel monthly versus bi-monthly for multifamily?
It's bi-monthly.
It's all bi-monthly.
Oh,
So
perfect.
just look at this print. Okay.
So
all
the
right.
other thing that's hurting us is we're only using 71% of our current capacity of ERCs in here. That's why our stuff is so darned awfully expensive, because we're already not collecting
You're only using 75% of the system.
71.
What does
Yeah.
that mean?
Make sure I understand that you're saying that you have a system of X, but you're only utilizing 71% of it. So there's 29% that's available to serve new accounts if you have.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's, I'll make sure I
Yes.
follow.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's right.
The rated
The-
capacity of the system is as Steve indicated.
And that's really, when they set this whole place up, the math they were using was being fully built out, but that was 35 years ago, and we still are not fully built out, so.
Yeah, I see that occasionally. I would agree with you and totally agree with you. Number one is that the lowest unit rate you'll have on your utility is the one that has the highest capacity utilization. I totally agree with that. And we've got very limited growth in here. If you could get to that 90% level, because you probably never will be 100%, you need some reserve margin for unknowns, but still, that's a lot better than 71%. I think it was the number you said. And that would be helpful.
Well, I have another question. This is Steve. I have another question. Now, we have recently sold 50 acres in here that's supposed to be getting 109 homes on it.
Right.
Under the current situation, they're going to supposedly buy 33 ERCs this year, next year, and the following year. But now there's no homes built there yet. So if we went to a rate base, we would lose a lot of the income off of those potential ERC sales, correct?
Well, if you went to a rate base or an assessment base, well, if it's an assessment base, I guess, I don't know who you would charge the rates to, I guess, as a developer. I guess because you can't charge an assessment a non-ad valorem assessment unless there's a special benefit. And right now, the benefit you have is base charge, charges for water service. That's
So are you
what you
saying,
have.
so if I'm understanding you correctly, then the properties that we've got in here that are not developed yet shouldn't be paying those non-ad valorem assessments?
I think we need to look at what that cost would be. If there's lines in front of those houses, then you should pay. I would be concerned if you've allocated capacity to those properties, you're 29%, and the the nexus is there, then charge them. I would
Well, how
not.
about if you just have the main trunk lines going past the properties?
That's definitely a benefit.
Then it's
Then it's a
valid.
benefit.
Yeah.
Well,
I
then
think
we're covered.
that's a benefit because that
Yeah,
property
Because the service
is
is
benefiting by
available.
the line being there. They can receive service. The question is,
Okay.
they're not receiving service, and there's some case law on this because it's on as a non-ad valorem assessment on the tax bill. You've got to follow this case law, which says
There's
the
parcel
charge has to
13
equal the benefit received.
the lines.
Sewer lines run up Union Road.
Steve, if I may,
Yes.
Mr. Rory did state that if you've given him the capacity, if you've given him those ERCs,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we've assigned those, which we have, we told him that he gets his 109. They can't go anywhere else because they're promised to him, then bill them.
Yeah. Not only that, I would adopt a guaranteed revenue charge or something like that, saying you're also going to pay the fixed operating cost per month or for whatever how you want to do it to maintain this capacity in a condition of readiness. That happens a lot, and you could assess that or build that and put them in the developer agreement. That you're going to pay me $5 in ERC per month to pay the cost of labor to run the plants, insurance. The variable cost would not be there because he's not taking the flow per se. But all those fixed costs, you can do that. And
Yeah,
that
and
can be a
Rob-
rate, not in the assessment. That could be a rate that he has to do through his development.
Yeah, Rob, and from the standpoint of adopting it as a rate, it's just from a district standpoint, it's just you have to have the data and analysis, but it's a 10-day published notice of modifying the rates, fees, and charges schedules to the rules, as opposed to having to go through the assessment process, as you mentioned, which is a more time-consuming public notice, mailed notices, legal notices in the paper. So it's a much easier way, more flexible, as you mentioned, to create rates, fees, and charges versus modifying the assessments.
Well, after listening to what he's having to say here, I'm kind of torn in between there because if we don't have enough data, and I almost guarantee you these utility rates are going to go up. We're way underpriced, and the costs are going way up. People are going to use less. I just know they will. I mean, that's the nature of the beast.
Initially, yes, and then they'll go back.
But I think what Rob is talking about, to avoid rate shock, it's a graduated increase. Is that correct, Rob?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
To avoid, I think what you recommended basically is to avoid rate shock, as they call it, is to have graduated increases to transition, if you're going to transition to another funding source.
The only downside to that is basically you're robbing your reserves so that they don't feel uncomfortable. I mean,
Right, and
is
I
that
know
really-
you, right, and that's why I thought let me go to hold on a second. I want to
12 months instead of 1.
And people are going to have a problem with that to start with because they're going to look at it and they're not going to put 2 and 2 together that non-ad valorem taxes are no longer there. But look at my water bill went through the roof. You know,
That's correct. That's
we have to realize we're going to have that pushback, and the only thing we can do is just keep telling them until maybe they understand. If they don't, I don't know how to fix that, but. That's going to happen. I mean, that's going to be a lot.
They're gonna go ballistic.
They are.
Yeah.
But as a board,
Yeah.
we have to be informed as to what is right and do what is right, whether we're going to get blowback or not.
Right.
I guess, Rob, I'm sorry, Rob, from a standpoint, if the board were to decide at some point to do some debt financing, whether it be, to do more than 20 years, you have to validate the borrowing. You have to go through a court validation. The district can borrow up to 5-year maturity without going through the court validation process. My experience is it's much easier to do the validation process to validate borrowing using rates, fees, and charges than to go through the assessment process. I assume Rob has that same experience. And I guess, Rob, from the standpoint of like SRF funding, that's the state revolving loan program,
Yes.
is it easier for them to understand rates, fees, and charges versus special assessments for utilities?
Yes.
No.
Now, I think so. I mean, that's usually the general pledge on an SRF loan is rate, fees, and charges. I have seen special assessments pledged to SRF loans. To get an SRF loan, it takes some ability to request that, but that loan works very, very well for you because once you get approved for that loan, you don't start paying that loan back until either project completion, which is 3 years roughly, or 3 years. And then they true up based on what you actually borrow. And you don't pay interest on anything until you borrow something. So if I borrow $100, I pay interest on the 100, not the full loan, and it accrues over time. And it's very cheap money, as you all know. What we assumed kind of was a quasi of that in this analysis. If you look on the screen, this is the capital plan we've got built in right now based on what was provided by the engineers and system manager. And you've got, $9 million of need in the next several years. This has been identified. So this is what we're trying to fund. And if you see these right here, you'll see new debt 2S. That's a new debt for sewer. And we have water right here. You can look at the green if you want. We've got them all at the same time. That's where our debt came from, with these projects right here. These are the projects anticipated or identified by a consultant engineer as top priority projects. They need to be done within the next, I believe, Neil, Kevin, if I'm wrong, I think it's the next 5 years that they really are recommending that these projects get implemented. So that's why you saw that front end load debt curve, capital curve earlier, and that would be the dashboard. Let me just take you back there real quick. That's this right here. You see my cursor. This gray is that debt server that I just showed you earlier, and there's the blue. So by issuing debt and raising rates, we build that cash balance stuff that I was talking about before, that we were utilizing too much cash. We're trying to build that up, knowing that past this point in 27, we want to be back to pay-as-you-go capital. Try to limit as much debt as we can, or preserve it for large projects, maybe expansion, maybe that AC pipe replacement issue, but yet try to keep a strong balance, because you also want funds resiliency. We have a storm event. You want to have funds there immediately to start tackling any issues before you get reimbursements or whatnot. And heaven help us, we don't want that, but it's good to have a balance there for that. So what we did, and if you also, let me just take you back here. Well, here's the new debt. This is our debt models. This is that water, and here's the sewer, and they're added together. This is where we calculated everything. But we said that we're not going to pay any interest for 1 year. That's built into the borrowing. You see 4.1 here, 4.3 here. That's the borrow. That includes 1 year cap I and 2% issue cost right now. And that 2% links to the SRF loan administration fee. And so if you go SRF, this would almost be the same structure you'd have, but you wouldn't be paying capitalized interest, but you'd be accruing it based on what you actually borrowed. So if you have a slow construction period, your cap I amount would be less than this, which would be beneficial. But we did this on purpose either mirror SRF or mirror financing. Again, and the reason why, just real quick, and I'll stop here, was to limit the revenue requirements up front, no debt service payments up front, to allow you to phase in rates over time and revisit it. If our CIP is too aggressive, you may push that debt out. Then you want to keep raising rates if you don't have the debt there, and you could possibly convert that debt to pay-as-you-go capital. So that's why, and we can give you. I can give you this little spreadsheet. Although it's proprietary, you can have it.
Well, we would need that spreadsheet because if we get grants, it's gonna all change, right?
Right. So I'm not sure if you're aware that we have around $5 million in reserves right now. Over the next 3 years, we should be bringing in another $1.6 million in selling ERCs. So does it make sense? Now, Tony, our attorney here, gave us a source of getting money extremely cheaply to borrow it. Does it make sense to borrow money with those kind of reserves, or should we?
Yeah, Rob, it's the SRF program. I handed out just sort of a cover sheet from the SRF program, plus, what the current rates are, the bond rate, the SRF rates.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes,
some
sir.
of those rates are 0.6%.
That's probably the wastewater one.
Yeah.
That is 0.6. Water, I think, is in the 2% range, if I'm not mistaken, 2.5. The drinking water is higher than clean water. Clean sewer, drinking, obviously, water.
1.41.
Yeah, there's some factors to it. The area, how is it economically depressed or whatnot, which I don't think you are.
Okay.
There's some factors to all that, but the point is, if the district can access the SRF loan program, I would definitely do it. You're under their caps right now. They've got some caps on the amount they'll loan, but these projects are not there. I will tell you, you may want to look at water and sewer separate. You're going to have to look at it separately to go to the SRF loan, because one's a clean water loan, sewer, and one's a drinking water. You can't mix the two. They're separate. So,
Sure.
But it may be beneficial for you to do those, the water with reserves, let's say, and do the sewer from SRF loan, which has the cheapest interest rate, and try to submit for one loan, not two, which is, costly. The other thing is the applications are different for each one, which makes no sense at all. But they're different. And even the capital finance plan for water is totally different in structure than the capital finance plan for sewer, although you're going to the same agency. I will
So would
also
that be
tell
more
you.
than 2%, do you think?
I'm sorry?
Would you think that would be more than a 2% origination fee?
No, it's still 2%. The admin
Okay.
fee is still 2%.
And I guess, Rob, also, that my understanding is that in order to, we can put a request for inclusion in, and then you need to also say what you want the money for, and there's a facilities plan has to be approved. And that preparation of the facilities plan and the funding of the design and the construction, they can all be part of loan agreements. Is that correct? All
Yes.
those expenses?
Yes.
Well, Dan has nothing to do other than to work on that sort of thing. Right, Dan?
But you got to be ready. I think you may have to have construction drawings or whatever to send up there to get included. I know the design part, I'm not sure how you get that loan, but because
I was just talking to an engineer this morning, Rob, who for Tetra Tech, and they do a lot of SRF loans.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Yeah, and they do gateways, and the request for inclusion, we may have missed it for August, but there's another one in November. And that request for inclusion can request inclusion to pay for the facilities plan, engineering costs, and it can be for design loan, and it can be for construction. But for the request for inclusion, you don't need to have you don't have to have plans for that. You do the facilities plan, then the design. So
Now, the other thing, like I said earlier, and as you know, if you say you're doing water, that's where most of your projects are in the near term. I would put as many projects in there as you can to try to get approval. You don't have to do them, or fund them from there. It's up to you. But I would try to get as flexible as you can get with the SRF, because 2% money is still cheap. And by the way, they've gotten an influx of money from the Infrastructure Act, that was approved months ago, up to Congress. Those monies have flowed down. It's all being dispersed through the SRF loan type program. It's all in there.
One thing that's, just as a side note also, is that DEP will enter into loan agreements for 5-year maturities, which is the district can do that without validation, but they've also had situations where they've entered into the 5-year loan agreements with the recognition that the entity will then move for a validation of a 20-year borrowing, and then we'll amend the loan agreement later on for the 20 years. Or you can just do the validation up front for the 20 years.
I would try to get the 20 years up front, just do it.
My gut on this whole thing is I really didn't want to take out any loans.
Understood.
But if it makes sense to do it, then I have to change my thinking.
It's just there. It's another vehicle.
Well, I'll tell you this. I've heard that a lot. And to be honest with you,
5% on like payment.
Debt is not a bad thing, depending on what your capital needs are at that time, because you're financing 40, 50, 60-year assets with 20-year debts, which is good. Too much debt is not a good thing. And right now you're at zero. And the goal was try not to over leverage the system at all, because you don't want that. And I don't think this plan, or is being talked earlier about going to the SRF program, will do that. But again, by going to the SRF program and having projects that you can limit how much you borrow, even though you're approved, supports your concern of too much debt or I don't want debt. Let's say you get 1.6 million continuously and you're accruing cash, then don't borrow from the SRF.
Right.
Even though you're approved, you can say, hey, we're done. Our loan is $2 million and that's it. And we're going to pay $50,000 a year at whatever the number is. You have that flexibility with the SRF loan. But you got to get approval first. That's how I see it. That's how I've seen people utilize it.
On the other part of that is the hotel, for an example, is struggling partially because of our tax system. I mean, if we borrowed that money, could we then not have to have those rates necessarily go up as much? And
depends on what you borrow and when, but yes, you could probably defer some of the rate adjustments. I would probably adopt the first one or two and then go back and look at it again, because if you don't need the rate increases, you shouldn't do them. I'll say that right now.
Right.
But looks to me that you're probably going to need rate adjustments in the near term. But I think you could probably delay over time, depending on what the capital needs are or the implementation schedule of the capital needs. If they can be deferred a little bit, obviously, where you're going, you have more flexibility. You can possibly reduce that rate just a little. But I think
there has been talk about redeveloping some of the land in here, which would use a lot of those ERCs that are unused right now. So I'd like to try to figure out how we can make it more attractive for somebody to come in here and make that happen. Either being at the hotel or on the 7 acres over here or Scott Preppen's land or whomever it is. We need to get growth in here somehow. And I know in the past, what's killed this place has been our non-ad valorem taxes. I mean, we had guys paying $200,000 a year that weren't doing anything.
Right.
And that's one of the assumptions we had shared with Rob was over the short term, the absorption of new units. We programmed it at 1% over the course of the next, 4 years, just because by the time somebody can get something platted or a condominium recorded or any zoning associated with some sort of independent and assisted living facility is just, over the short term, we don't see a lot of.
Of course,
of
yes.
absorption there.
Now, cases will probably be different. His will move along a lot faster than that, but anything else
Agreed.
is a 3-year building process.
Yeah.
Rob, let me ask you this at this point as we're looking for final questions. As you know, this is a workshop today, so the board is precluded from taking any action, but our regular meeting will be a week from today, and we will be discussing an implementation plan at next week's meeting. I think your summary and conclusions here were all understood. If you have the availability a week from today, we would do this at a time certain, just to see if the board had any final questions before they take action on an implementation plan.
That would be Friday, the 21st.
Yes, sir?
Just let me know when it is.
Okay, and again, as a courtesy to you, we do it at a time certain, and I'll work that out between our office and the chairman.
Do you think it'll be are your meetings normally 9 o'clock or 9:30 start?
Yes, sir?
Okay. I imagine it'll be early in the morning. That works better for me. That's where I was going to, is that morning's probably better than afternoon on a Friday.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing always happens, you know?
Neil,
Yeah, we'll get you in almost at the very beginning of the meeting. If we need
Whatever's
you.
best for you. But I'm free. So, you know, if it's later in the meeting, that's okay. It's still morning. So
We appreciate that offer.
Steve, may I ask one more question, please?
Yes.
Sure.
All right, I'm just going over something you talked about, Mr. Ori, about collecting, like, we call them O&Ms. So it's maintenance on the water system for the vacant land. Did you say that that is okay to bill them maintenance if they have vacant land, if we have maintenance costs?
If there is a benefit that they're receiving from the asset that we're trying to get the maintenance from, yes. And I've seen this before where the transmission lines, collection lines, distribution lines, and any related costs associated with that, could be a pump station, for example. If those properties that are vacant have those lines in front of them, I've seen utilities charge a line maintenance fee or a line, things of that nature, to maintain those lines in a state of readiness to serve them, and they get billed. You know, they're not huge charges, you know, $2, $3, $4, $5, $6 a month. It'd be a little higher down there, but I have definitely seen that, and I think that's fair. You'd have to adopt a rate, you know, line maintenance fee, for example, is what I've seen for that. Now, the cost of the treatment plant, because if they have paid a connection fee or something, or reserve the capacity, I'd give your legal counsel, we can all get together to make sure, but I've seen utilities try to bill those as well, to the extent that nexus has been incurred. The key is, have you incurred does the nexus exist to bill those vacant properties? And clearly with the lines around the house, there's a benefit there. They can hook up anytime they want.
Okay, thank you.
I'm good.
Rob, with that, again, it was a pleasure to be able to work with you on this regard. It's an impressive piece of work, and we're very appreciative that, you know, with an introduction by the Collier County Utilities, you took us on and put us into your work plan this spring. We know that you're very busy. We'll look forward then to next week's meeting for hopefully some implementation decisions at that time.
Okay, and if you have any other questions, Neil or Kevin, just give us a holler. You know how to find us, and anything we can do to help you, just let us know.
Yep, and Rob, Tony Pierce here. It's nice working on the same side of you for a change.
Yeah, I know. No, it's good to be allied. Finally.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. We'll see you. Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Okay, I'll stop sharing. All right, thanks a lot.
So it looks like the other utilities around us are going up 9.5%.
Yeah, Lee County is, I think, went up 8%. I'm not sure Collier, they,
It will be at least 7.7.
And unfortunately, our water and sewer is already expensive.
Yep.
We're on the very high side. And it's because we don't have everybody paying in.
We have.
All the ERCs aren't in play.
Well, but that's one of our goals here, was to include the marina somehow. The marina doesn't seem to be paying fair share with it, so.
Well, I'm looking the same way with the condos then at the hotel that are just on 1 meter.
Yeah, I didn't know about that, I just, because, well,
Did we get paid from the
they're paying us.
hotel yet?
We called them.
I'm not aware that we have.
Really? When's their time up?
Next week, we will be shutting off accounts here.
I talked to them too.
And in advance, we put a courtesy call into both the hotel to tell them that it was inevitable, and we did the same for a large property management company, Resort Properties,
Yeah.
who manage some of the condominiums. We have 3 of their accounts that are scheduled for turn off next week.
But the hotel minions,
Yep.
they're paying us $12.50 a year.
Each?
Yes, each one, non-ad valorem, they're paying us $12.50. Because I looked it up, and they're only valued at $85,000.
Yeah, that's not a true thing anymore.
Yeah, but they're paying us $12.50. I mean, a condo's only paying what, $1,400, $1,500? I mean, Orchid Cove condo. So I mean, that's a 300 square foot unit.
Okay, but what I'm getting at then is if we went to the unit base billing and they've only got 1 meter, then we would lose there as we're losing on the
Right. Oh,
the
okay.
marina
If we went
now.
to it, yeah. But right now they're paying, and the boats are only paying. The most expensive boat is $762 or something like that, non-ad valorem. So if you put a meter on there and the base rate is $117 a month.
Do you have a recommendation after reading all this and looking at all this?
I have a general concern with the shock value that you alluded to earlier. I feel more so as a result of having sent a whole host of delinquent notices with delinquent fees and the ensuing phone calls and emails. I bet we've had 50
Oh, yeah.
in the last week, and it's everything from, my Aunt Bessie got sick to,
I didn't know.
we never got the bill, and, and these sort of things. So I think there will be some political blowback.
Well, I thought we were going to change this was the time, or coming up, that we were going to change the deposit on the meters to also, for the rental people.
Yeah.
You said it's what, $50 or whatever it is, we need to make it $250 or $300?
We haven't had a lot of that. There's a couple.
Well, then who's delinquent?
There's a list of about,
Lot.
Really?
and
Hotels over 12 grand.
we are going to,
It's other people.
we sent shut-off notices to the top 30 on the list of receivables for amounts over $400 and who are at least 60 days delinquent. And most of these are closer to 120 days. And I'm sure a lot of them will pay, but that starts is 17.
And what's a late fee? 25 bucks?
$25.
Well, I'll guarantee you, because I've talked to Tom, how if I owed you $12,000 and you're going to fine me $25 for not paying it, why would I pay it?
Because he's gonna turn your water off.
Well, then I bring it up to date, and then I don't pay for another 3 months. I'm thinking then, instead of that, there should be a $25 base pay, and then there should be a percentage of what the bill is.
Well, that's a discussion we can.
If I may, okay, we're going through some collection issues with our boat docks and seawall that we put in at Stella Maris. And we've opted for a $35 a month late fee charge and 18% interest because you can go that high by law. So once they get to the 30 days, if they're later than that, they're getting charged 18% interest and $35 a month.
Very good. That sounds reasonable.
Well, if the board wants to, then I guess it would be, I want to use either Neil or Kevin to come up with a proposed change to the rates, fees, and charges.
Yeah.
To incorporate some of these.
I can make that, that's something that we can probably have coincide with the start of the fiscal year at the end of September and just have updated rate structure. You know, your current rates have been folded into your administrative rules of procedure.
Right.
And
Well,
they can be amended by resolution, but
Correct.
there are some notice requirements in advance of changing those rules.
Yeah, there's two, one is a 10-day notice in the paper, the other day is a notice in the billing cycle prior to the hearing date. So when's the last hearing, the billing cycle will be before October 1?
I have a question.
So August.
Probably August.
So it need to be,
We have a policy on billing, rates, everything, right? I've never seen it. Does it exist?
well, we have the rules of procedure, have a utility section in there. It talks about we can record liens,
So,
it talks about the delinquent process and everything else.
That's the
Okay,
other thing.
so can-
I'm sorry.
this new consultant that we hired, can he update that for us?
Well, the rates, fees, and charges is a separate document.
But, yeah, but the body of that, the late fees,
We could at least
How we turn things
do
on
a
and off.
comparison with what, say, Collier County or the city of Marco are doing with respect to deposits, late fees, and charges on unpaid balances.
I mean, I'd like to see that. And
Be easy
and I
to
think
find
people,
out.
you know,
I'll make a note of that.
if you have a water bill, don't you want to know what's going on? Or is it just me, am I crazy?
The other thing is,
I do think, just to finish my
There's a
thoughts,
policy, I wanna
with
see it.
respect to Steve's question, I do think this is the way to go.
the unit base,
Rate-based, metered sale,
Consumer rate.
put this thing more on a business sort of platform. But to your point, there will be a certain, I think we need to market and announce in every way that we can what your intent is, because they'll swear up and down that they never knew, and then suddenly they're going to get a water bill that is $300, and they're going to freak out.
sucks to be you.
It's amazing to me that people got their shut-off notice, but they tell me they never got the bill.
Yeah.
And
Really?
Neil, that's why, you know, delaying maybe going to meter base till after this tax cycle, just to get all these points y'all are saying in place. Because I do also agree the unit-based approach for those condos versus a meter is also the right thing to do, and make sure you have that count right, because you're gonna have to notice everybody what's going on. Tax are. But I agree with y'all saying, the other thing on late fees real quick is it's pretty common to have a minimum with a percentage. You know, usually I see something like $5 or $10. I know that's not 25, but it's usually applied for that single family home using 5,000 gallons a month. But commercial customer or hotel shouldn't pay $5 or $25. I totally agree with that. And I think having the minimum with an adder on it makes a lot of sense. You wouldn't be out there on your own on something like that. Just
Understood.
One other point I think Rob mentioned, and Neil may have mentioned also, I think in the dealings with Cuyahoga County, I think that if Cuyahoga County, if the board district still wants at some point in time, think about having the county take over the operation.
Do you think that's a possibility that they'll come to us at some point?
Well, I think if we go to them, just my sense,
Yeah.
with a rate structure and a fiscal structure that's familiar to them and getting away from the non-ad valorem assessment, I think that's something that would be more palatable. That's just my sense.
And I get-
Neil, do you have that same sense?
I said that when you interviewed us a year ago. I said, long-term, I wasn't sure you wanted to own and operate a utility for 1,000 people in the middle of the Everglades. And
Well,
if
I'm
we
gonna-
could
yeah.
convince the county that the associated revenue generation from this community, from a regional perspective, I think that's customer base they'd love to have.
And I'm gonna guess too that when this new rate structure comes into effect, we're gonna have, everybody's gonna be saying, sell it to the county. You know, they're gonna want to, because they're gonna
Well,
proceed.
you look at on the horizon, you know, $10 million in capital improvements over the next 5 years, and you know, you speak to people's common sense. That's what it takes to operate a public works type, you know, infrastructure like that, and you're going to have to make those sort of investments. Deferred maintenance is never the way to go.
And they've been doing it for years.
Yeah, it's always Friday night, it's always raining, and something breaks, and
Well,
the guy you need is on vacation.
The thing that surprised me is that they were never taking into account depreciation and amortization into our budgets.
Yeah.
It just boggles my mind.
One other aspect too is if the board at some point in time, county agreed to a transaction to sell, there's a separate statutory mechanism for that. Where
Yes, sir.
you have to study, yeah, well, we've been through it, Rob, with Gateway and Lee County.
Yeah.
And where both the county and the district enter into these analysis and studies to show that it's in the best interest of the parties, and they have public hearings and workshops and town hall meetings, a very extensive process to get that full input. But that's a requirement also, so it's not just something you rush into, if that's gonna be the desire of the community.
I get a question about the, now we have multiple water treatment plants in Collier County,
A handful.
a handful. Is each one a separate division? Do they charge different rates
They
under
do.
different?
No.
So,
The municipalities all have their own systems, Everglades, Marco, and Naples. In addition, there is a utility that is in Immokalee, that is a separate district. Oddly enough, board members are appointed by the governor. And then you have the county system, which probably covers twice the amount of customers as the rest. The county system probably has 70,000 customers or something.
well, that's what I mean. There's one on Woodland, right? And there's one over here by,
The county has a total of 4 plants, 2 water and 2 wastewater. And it's North and South County, and it's a regional type system.
But I think the county charges uniform rates throughout it, so.
They do.
that's my question.
Collier County system charges uniform rates.
Most recently,
Correct, Rob?
the county
Yes.
did purchase a utility at the Orange Tree community out by the fairgrounds. That was a negotiated sale and was in furtherance of the county's expansion plans for the area out and including Ave Maria and places like that.
Now you also have, I think Florida Government Utility Authority, they still do Golden Gate, Rob, or not?
No, Golden Gate has been sold to the county,
Okay.
and got rate relief. The county, I believe, also has acquired that Goodland system. It was a separate district by itself, and I believe it now is folded into the county regional system.
And the county.
Did we,
Same
did we
rates for
agree
everybody.
that, okay, did we agree that even though all these different plants are owned by the county, the rate is the same throughout, or is each one charged different rate?
They're all
No,
the same.
they're all the same. For the county-owned facilities, all those rates are the same. Immokalee separate, that's a different district, like was mentioned earlier. Ave Maria is separate. Naples is separate. Who else?
Marco Island, Everglades City, they're all.
Marco Island is separate. That's correct. Because they're separate utilities. But all the rest of the county, like as Neil mentioned, it's probably closer to almost 100,000 customers now because they acquired Golden Gate. They are all charged a single rate for water. They have a residential, commercial, and rate. It's meter based, as we talked about earlier.
Before we leave, I have one little housekeeping thing to share with you. Your Form 1 financial disclosure is due July the 1st. It is very important this year because they no longer will accept a paper form that we would historically send to the supervisor of elections. It's on the state ethics website now.
How specific do we need to get?
You only do a Form 1, which means that you list the sources of your income, not the amounts. But
Oh, not the amounts?
That's a totally different form. But for your level, it requires you to list sources of income and any debt, the sources or holders of any debt, whether it be a mortgage or.
But not the amounts.
Not the amounts.
Okay.
But it is very important that you go onto the state's ethics website. We have preloaded your names and your official email addresses, and you will need to establish a PIN number or password. If you've already done it, then
we did it for re-election and you had to do it.
thank you.
Okay.
So why did it?
And you're going to end up paying a fine, and then you get on the kind of the naughty list, and you don't want to go there.
I don't know.
It's always on that list.
And with that,
I think Russ has a question.
No, I had a question just for you. This was different. I was just gonna say, if the county water system all charges the same rates, you need to use that for us to get the fire rates the same for everybody. So, I don't know how that works.
The district has a problem with it.
We just had a meeting with them, Neil and I,
Yeah,
and our attorney, and they think it's just fine.
we pay 3 times as
Oh,
much.
the county?
Yeah, they think it's just fine, because they're supplementing us. We should be thanking them for the millions of dollars that they're subsidizing our fire protection for,
I don't get it. The vacations.
right?
Is here.
yeah, and
And oh, by the way, I'm supposed to tell the board people here that quit picking on Mr. LeCastro, because the county's doing a lot of things for us. And
That was him talking.
Could he send a list?
And he's getting all these calls from people who want to park their boats at the marina and don't want to park boats at the marina and blah. I mean, you know,
Gee, that's too bad.
but it is hard. I felt like I was working under a foot there when he came in, because it made it sound like we're not very user friendly.
You're not grateful.
your chairman showed tremendous restraint.
Didn't I though?
Absolutely.
And with that, I think we can stand adjourned, and we'll see you a week from today.
Okay.
All right, guys. Have a great week. To all the dads, happy Father's Day.
Continue, Rob.
Thank you.
All right, take care. All right.
You did a great job.
I'm Treasurer Sunset.